I arrived at the courthouse alone, carrying nothing but a briefcase full of documents. My daughter looked at me and smirked. "No lawyer, Dad. Then you might as well give up now." My son-in-law chuckled beside her, as if he was already certain they would get my retirement savings and take my house. But he didn't get to laugh for very long. Moments later, the judge looked down at a file, paused, and said something that left both of them completely speechless. "This story weighs heavy, but I'm grateful you're here with me. Before we begin, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to stand up to family when they crossed a line? Yes or no is enough. Your perspective truly matters. Just a note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling. What matters most is the lesson at its heart. No lawyer, Dad. Then just give up now and save everyone the time." My daughter Adrienne said it loud enough for the entire courthouse hallway to hear clear, unhurried, the voice of someone who had already decided how this would end. Brent stood beside her and smiled. Adrienne Harrington, 42, spoke with the casual cruelty of a woman who had stopped seeing me as her father and started seeing me as an obstacle. I sat across from them at the defendant's table, though. I suppose in a guardianship case there are no true defendants, only family members fighting over whether I was competent enough to manage my own life. At 73, I had spent 38 years investigating financial fraud for the federal government, but I never imagined I'd need those skills to defend myself against my own family. My daughter, Adrienne, 42 and wearing that practiced, concerned expression, placed her hand over Brent's as if to silence him. The gesture looked protective. It wasn't. Victor Prescott, 52 and one of Austin's top probate attorneys, represented them with the confidence of a man who hadn't yet read the fine print. Judge Nathaniel Dalton, 62, with the gravity of a former federal prosecutor, entered the Travis County Courthouse, and we all rose. He settled into his chair, adjusted his reading glasses, and opened the thick personnel file. My daughter's attorney had subpoenaed the one documenting my entire career. I watched Victor Prescott's confident expression as the judge began to read. I'd seen that look before on the faces of financial criminals who thought their schemes were too clever to unravel. The judge's eyebrows rose. He turned a page, then another. "Mr. Whitfield," Judge Dalton said, looking up from the file. "It says here you spent 38 years investigating federal financial fraud cases." "Yes, Your Honor. And you conducted over 200 investigations into guardianship fraud, elder financial abuse, and fraudulent power of attorney schemes." 217, Your Honor. Victor Prescott's confidence faltered. Just slightly, but I caught it, the way his pen stopped moving mid-note, the way he glanced at Adrienne with something that looked like concern. Brent Harrington shifted in his seat. The mockery had drained from his face. "But to understand how I arrived at that courtroom table defending myself against my own daughter, you need to know where this began. 1 week after my wife Wilma died in that cold hospital room, after 46 years of marriage ended with a monitor's flat tone, my daughter Adrienne arrived at my door carrying a casserole dish and wearing concern like a coat she'd borrowed. 'Dad, are you managing okay?' she asked, but her eyes weren't on me. They moved slowly across the kitchen, the living room, the bookshelves, the way someone looks at a property before making an offer. She set the dish on the counter almost as an afterthought. 'We need to talk about Mom's life insurance paperwork and the bank accounts.' My grandson, Kieran, 13, with anxious eyes that didn't match his parents' calculated expressions, clutched a chess set like a shield. He'd always been quiet during their visits, watching more than speaking. 'I can handle it myself,' I told Adrienne. 'You're alone now.' Brent spoke from my living room doorway, examining the photographs on my wall, Wilma's collection of family memories. 'You shouldn't have to do this by yourself. We're here to help. Help.' The word sat wrong and my mouth tasted like copper. My wife Wilma, who had passed just 7 days before, had always told me to watch for patterns. She'd been an accountant for 30 years before retirement. She understood that numbers like people revealed their true nature through repetition. "Which bank are the accounts with?" Adrienne asked, pulling out her phone. She was already typing before I answered. Quick focused screen tilted slightly away from me. When I stepped closer, it went dark. "I should have the login information, just in case something happens and we need to access them quickly." "Nothing's going to happen," I said. "Dad." She used her patient voice, the one that suggested I was being difficult. "You're 73 years old. What if you fall? What if you forget to pay a bill? I'm trying to protect you." Protect. Another word that didn't fit right. Kieran looked up from the chess set he'd been arranging on my coffee table. "Grandpa, can we play?" "In a minute," I told him, watching Adrienne move through my kitchen like she was cataloging assets. They left an hour later, taking the casserole dish, but leaving questions hanging in the air like smoke. February arrived with unseasonable warmth. Adrienne began visiting every Sunday, always with Kieran, always with cake or cookies, always with questions wrapped in daughterly concern. "Dad, whose name is on your retirement account, now that Mom's gone?" She cut slices of store-bought pound cake while I filled the kettle. "Just so we know who to contact if you get sick." "It's in my name," I said, as always. "Right, but there should be a beneficiary. Or maybe we should add my name to the account just for emergency access." I had spent 38 years recognizing patterns in financial fraud. This was not the first time my daughter had asked about that retirement account. It was the second. "Grandpa, can we play chess?" Kieran asked, his voice cutting through the tension neither adult was acknowledging. We played while Adrienne cleaned my kitchen, unrequested, unnecessary, but performed with the dedication of someone establishing presence. Kieran moved his knight to protect his king. Smart boy. He understood defense. March continued the pattern. Every Sunday. Every visit included financial questions dressed as concern. "Dad, have you thought about updating your will? Mom's name is probably still on the house deed." "Dad, do you have long-term care insurance? We should review your policies." "Dad, have you considered a power of attorney just in case you're ever hospitalized and can't make decisions?" Third time, fourth time, the retirement account question repeated like a rhythm. I watched my daughter move through my home, the home Wilma and I had built together in Cedar Park, the home we'd paid off in 2015, the home that held 46 years of marriage in its walls. Adrienne touched things with the casualness of someone who'd already decided ownership. Brent always accompanied her now. He never asked questions directly, but he listened with the intensity of a man taking inventory. Kieran played chess with me every visit, quiet and careful, while his parents cataloged my life in conversational questions. That evening after they left, I took out my old investigation notebook, the one I'd used for tracking fraud cases at the federal level. The leather cover was worn from decades of use, pages filled with patterns. I'd documented schemes. I'd unraveled criminals I'd helped prosecute. I opened to a fresh page and wrote the date, March 23, 2025. Then 4 simple words: fourth retirement account inquiry. My daughter didn't know it yet, but she'd just triggered something far more dangerous than a father's suspicion. She'd triggered an inspector's investigation. The knock came on a Tuesday morning in May, 3 weeks after I'd started tracking the pattern. Joanne Stafford, 72 and my neighbor for 15 years, stood at my door with worry creasing her face in a way I'd never seen before. She held a dish towel in her hands, twisting it like she'd walked over without realizing she'd carried it from her kitchen. "Lester, I need to tell you something," she said. "Can I come in?" We sat in my living room, the same room where Adrienne had cataloged my life weeks earlier. Joanne perched on the edge of Wilma's favorite chair, still twisting that dish towel. "Your daughter came to see me yesterday," she said. "She asked me some questions that didn't sit right." I waited. 38 years as an investigator taught me that silence makes people talk more than questions do. She wanted to know if you've been forgetful, if you've gotten lost driving, if you confuse your words or repeat yourself. Joanne looked at me with something like apology in her eyes. "She didn't ask if you're eating properly, if you seem lonely, if you need help with the yard work. She only asked about your memory. There it was. The confirmation I'd been tracking in my notebook, now delivered by a neighbor, who understood the difference between concern and evidence gathering. What did you tell her? I asked. Joanne's hands stilled on the dish towel. I told her you're the sharpest 73-year-old I know. That you helped me program my phone, that you still beat the neighborhood kids at chess in the park, that you remember everyone's birthday better than I do. She paused. She looked disappointed, Lester, like I'd given her the wrong answer. She wrote something in her phone right after that. Joanne added quietly. She didn't look worried about you, Lester. She looked like someone whose plan had hit a small delay. Did she ask you anything else? I asked her if you're eating properly. You know, since Wilma passed. Joanne's voice softened at my wife's name. She looked at me like I'd asked something ridiculous, like she couldn't understand why that would matter, because it didn't fit the narrative she was building. A man who forgets things needs a guardian. A man who's lonely needs a visitor. Adrienne wasn't collecting evidence of need, she was collecting evidence of incompetence. Thank you, Joanne, I said. You did the right thing coming here. She left the dish towel on my coffee table, forgetting it the same way she'd brought it. After she left, I opened my investigation notebook and added a new entry, May 14, 2025. Neighbor interviews begun. Evidence gathering confirmed. 38 years investigating fraud. Taught me one thing: when people gather evidence about you, they're not concerned for you. They're building a case against you. The weekend brought Kieran back to my house. Adrienne had stopped coming inside. She waited in the car now, sending her son to my door, like a messenger. I wondered if she knew that retreat made her look more guilty, not less. Kieran sat at my kitchen table eating the cookies I'd bought specifically because they were his favorite chocolate chip with walnuts from the bakery on Anderson Mill Road. "Grandpa," he said, crumbs dotting the corner of his mouth, "when are you moving to Sunrise Manor?" I'd been pouring milk. My hand stopped mid-motion, glass half full. "What?" "Sunrise Manor, in Round Rock." He said it casually, the way a child mentions something overheard and not fully understood. "Grandma Helene said it has private rooms. She said you'll like it." Grandma Helene. My late wife's mother. Helene Darnell. 79, and sharp as a knife, who'd never forgiven me for retiring from the federal government instead of taking the promotion to Washington that would have moved her daughter to a better zip code. Wilma had died 7 months ago, and already Helene was orchestrating plans for my future. "When did Grandma Helene tell you this?" I kept my voice level, casual, matching Kieran's tone. "Last night. At my house." He reached for another cookie. "She was talking to Dad in the kitchen. I was getting water." "What exactly did she say?" Kieran shrugged with the practiced indifference of a 13-year-old. "She said after the trial, this house won't be yours anymore. She said Sunrise Manor has private rooms and activities, and you'll like it better than being alone here. After the trial." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Not if there's a trial. Not we're considering options. After the trial. Present tense. Inevitable. Did she say anything else? Just that it's close to Mom's house so she can visit more. He looked up at me with those anxious eyes that never quite matched his casual words. "Are you moving, Grandpa?" "No," I said. "I'm not moving." He nodded, relieved in the way children are when adults give definitive answers to uncertain situations. We played chess after that. I let him win, which he noticed, which made him smile. After he left, I added the entry to my notebook, May 18, 2025. Sunrise Manor, Round Rock. Trial referenced as certainty. Helene Darnell actively involved. Timeline more advanced than initially suspected. That's when I understood the depth of what I was facing. Not just questions about money, but a fully formed plan with timelines, facilities, and outcomes already decided. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after writing that entry, staring at the phone. The house was quiet, in the way it had been since Wilma died, not peaceful, just empty. Through the window I could see Joanne's house, the park where I played chess with neighborhood kids, the street Wilma and I had walked every evening for 20 years. This house, the one we'd saved for, bought in 1998, paid off early by living below our means and saving every bonus check. The one where we'd hosted Adrian's 16th birthday, where Kieran had taken his first steps during a visit, where Wilma had sat beside me during her cancer treatments and said she was fighting to have more mornings in this kitchen. They'd already chosen where to put me. They'd already discussed the trial. They'd already decided this house, my house, wouldn't be mine anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I'd memorized 40 years ago. Floyd Townsend answered on the second ring, his voice exactly the same as it had been when we'd worked cases together at the federal building in Austin. "Lester," he said, "it's been too long." I looked at my investigation notebook, at the entries I'd made, at the pattern that had emerged. I thought about Joanne's warning, about Kieran's innocent questions, about the nursing home that already had my name on an application I'd never filled out. I said 2 words, "I need you." Floyd Townsend arrived at the cafe before I did, and I realized I'd spent 40 years trusting this man's instincts about money and people. He sat in a corner booth under yellow light that made the wood paneling look warm instead of dated. Floyd Townsend, 70, and still sharp as our inspector days, looked up when I entered, and I knew before I finished speaking that he'd already identified the pattern. We'd worked together at the federal building in Austin for 2 decades, investigating financial crimes that destroyed families and bankrupted companies. Now we sat across from each other in worn leather chairs, and the case was my own family. "Start from the beginning," Floyd said, ordering coffee for both of us without asking. He still remembered I took it black. I told him everything. Adrienne's visits after Wilma's funeral, the questions about bank accounts and retirement funds wrapped in daughterly concern. Joanne's warning about the neighbor interviews focused on memory and confusion rather than health or loneliness. Kieran's innocent revelation about Sunrise Manor in Round Rock, about the trial referenced as inevitable, about Helene Darnell's involvement in planning where I'd live after my house was no longer mine. Floyd listened the way he always had during case briefings, silent, focused, taking occasional sips of coffee. His expression didn't change until I mentioned Helene's name. "Helene Darnell," he repeated, setting down his cup. "Wilma's mother. The one who wanted you to take that Washington promotion 30 years ago. She's never forgiven me for choosing Texas over advancement. And now Wilma's gone, and suddenly your daughter needs access to your finances." Floyd leaned back, and I saw the investigator's mind working behind his eyes. "How many times has Adrian asked about specific accounts?" 4 times about the retirement account, twice about life insurance, 3 times about the house deed. Always the same accounts. Always. Floyd was quiet for a moment, looking at something beyond me. Not the cafe wall, but a pattern only experience could see. "Lester," he said finally, "this isn't the smell of worry. This is the smell of money." The words landed with the weight of diagnosis. Not suspicion anymore. Not family dysfunction. Criminal conspiracy. "I've seen this 20 times in our career," Floyd continued. "Families wait for the elderly to become vulnerable. Death of a spouse is perfect timing. Then they start gathering evidence. Questions to neighbors about memory. Concerns about confusion. They build a narrative of incompetence, file a guardianship petition, and by the time the person realizes what's happening, a judge has already appointed someone else to control their assets. Adrienne's my daughter. That's what makes it work." Floyd's voice was clinical, the way it had been when we'd interviewed fraud suspects. "Judges want to believe family members have good intentions. Adult children expressing concern about aging parents. It looks responsible. Courts move fast on these cases because they think they're protecting vulnerable people. There's something particularly cold about hearing a friend clinically describe the mechanics of your own family trying to rob you. They don't need you dead, Floyd said. Just incompetent in the court's eyes. Much easier. They file a petition citing memory issues, confusion, inability to manage finances. They bring in the neighbor testimony, maybe a doctor they've consulted. Court appoints a guardian, usually the petitioner, and suddenly every account has a new signature authority. The house. Guardian gets power of attorney. Can sell assets for your care. Sunrise Manor costs what $5,000 a month. 6. Your house in Cedar Park is worth, what did you tell me last time we talked? $400,000. $420 at the last appraisal. Enough to pay for a nursing home for 7 years. And after 7 years, if you're still alive, Medicaid kicks in. Floyd's expression was grim. Meanwhile, the house sale proceeds sit in an account controlled by your guardian. Happens all the time. We investigated 17 cases like this in 2018 alone. The cafe smelled like coffee and old wood and something else I couldn't identify, maybe just the scent of my life being reduced to a case file. What do? I asked. Floyd looked at me with something between sympathy and respect. The question isn't why she's doing it. The question is, what do you want to do next? I thought about Wilma, about the house we'd built together, about 46 years of marriage ending with a conspiracy that started a week after her funeral. I thought about Adrienne asking Joanne about my memory. I thought about Kieran mentioning a trial as if it was already scheduled. This is when I understood. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a case, and I had 40 years of experience investigating cases exactly like this. Investigate, I said. Properly. The way we always did. Floyd smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. That's what I hoped you'd say. Where do we start? Financial records. You mentioned Brent always accompanies Adrian on visits now. What does he do for work? Consultant. Business development. I've never entirely understood it. Which means we don't know his financial situation. Desperate people do desperate things. Floyd pulled out a small notebook. He still used paper, same as me. Helene Darnell is involved. How's her financial situation? Comfortable, I thought. Wilma mentioned she'd downsized from her house to a condo a few years ago. Downsized by choice or necessity? I didn't have an answer. We need to know what's driving this, Floyd said. Follow the money first rule we learned. Someone needs your assets badly enough to destroy their relationship with you. We find out why we understand the timeline. I was right. In every fraud case we'd worked, the motivation revealed itself in financial pressure, debt, failed investments, lifestyle beyond means. There's something else, I said, remembering a detail I'd overlooked. Last month, Brent mentioned an LLC when he was talking to Adrienne in my kitchen. I only caught part of it, something about the Holloway account. Floyd's eyes sharpened. Holloway what? I couldn't hear clearly. But he said it like it was something they'd discussed before. Floyd pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen, with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd searched thousands of corporate records. His voice was quiet, almost casual. Holloway Family Management, LLC. Let me see how long this name has existed. Floyd found the company registration within minutes. Holloway Family Management, LLC, incorporated in Delaware. But unraveling its full structure would take days. The call from Denise Bentley at Austin Community Credit Union came before he finished on a Monday morning in June, and she didn't want to discuss it over the phone. Can you come to the branch? She asked. This afternoon, if possible. My office. Denise Bentley, 48, and managing the bank's fraud prevention department, closed her office door with the careful deliberation of someone about to deliver bad news. We'd known each other 15 years. She'd handled Wilma's estate paperwork. After the funeral, helped me update beneficiaries, explained the account transfers with patience most bankers didn't have time for. She didn't offer coffee. She pulled a printed document from a manila folder and slid it across her desk. There's a request to link your retirement account to an external account, she said. Came through our online system 3 days ago. Electronic signature, proper security questions, everything technically correct. I looked at the printout. Account ending in 4782. My federal retirement fund, the one with $700,000 from 38 years of government service. Why are you showing me this? I asked, though I already suspected. The electronic signature doesn't match your usual confirmation pattern. Denise turned the page, showing me metadata I wouldn't have understood without Floyd's recent tutorial on digital forensics. You typically log in between 6 and 8 in the morning. This came through at 11:47 p.m. And the IP address. She paused, uncomfortable. Tell me. The IP address points to Westlake Hills residential area. That's where my son-in-law Brent lives. The words came out flat, factual. Save everything. Don't delete anything. I froze the request immediately. Flagged it for investigation. The external account it was trying to link to. She turned another page. Holloway Family Management, LLC. There it was. The company Floyd was still researching, already reaching into my retirement account, like it had a right to be there. What would have happened if you'd approved it? Automatic monthly transfers. $5,000 initially, with authorization for increases if the account holder, meaning you requested them. Denise's voice was clinical, professional. Except you wouldn't have requested them. Whoever has access to the linked account would. $5,000 a month. $60,000 a year. My retirement fund drained systematically, legally, because the bank would think I'd authorized it. Seeing your son-in-law's digital fingerprints on an attempted theft of your retirement account does something to you. It transforms suspicion into documented crime. I need copies of everything, I said. The request, the metadata, the IP address, records, the external account information. Denise already had a second folder prepared. I can't officially give you the investigation file, but these are your account records. You're entitled to see any requests made regarding your own money. She understood what she was doing. 15 years of knowing each other meant she recognized when a customer needed ammunition, not just information. I called Floyd from the parking lot. He added Denise's findings to what he'd already discovered. Holloway Family Management, LLC had a business address in Delaware, but operated through a virtual office service. No physical location. No employees listed. Just a registered agent and a bank account waiting to receive my retirement funds. This is infrastructure, Floyd said. They built a company specifically to receive your assets. This isn't opportunistic greed, Lester. This is premeditated. The weekend brought Adrienne to my door alone this time, carrying a folder that looked official enough to be intimidating. Dad, I need you to sign something. She sat down at my kitchen table without being invited, spreading papers across the surface. It's emergency medical paperwork. If you suddenly get sick, another stroke, a fall, anything, I can make decisions faster. The doctor recommended it for everyone your age. Which doctor, I didn't ask. Instead, I pulled the papers toward me and began reading. Not skimming, every word, every clause, every paragraph printed in that small font meant to discourage careful examination. Page 3 revealed the truth buried in legal language. Financial power of attorney activated upon medical incapacitation as determined by a single physician of the attorney in fact's choosing. Control of all accounts, assets, and real property. Authority to sell, transfer, or liquidate without additional approval. This isn't medical paperwork, Adrienne, I said, still reading. This is financial authorization. It's for emergencies, so I can pay your bills if you can't. It gives you control of everything I own the moment any doctor you choose says I'm incapacitated. I looked up at her, including the house. Dad, you're being paranoid. I'm trying to help you by having me sign away control of my assets, by being prepared. You're 73 years old. What if something happens? How carefully do you think you'd read a document when you know the person handing it to you has already tried to rob you once? I read every word of those 12 pages. The authorization included retroactive power it would apply to any period of incapacity within the previous 6 months. The asset transfer provisions allowed immediate sale of real property without notice or probate. The medical determination clause required only one doctor's signature, no second opinion, no appeal. It was elegant, really. One signature, one convenient medical evaluation, and everything Wilma and I had built would transfer to Adrienne's control within days. "I'm not signing this," I said. "Dad, you can leave now." Her expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, frustration, anger, before settling on something that looked like calculation. "You're going to regret this," she said. Not upset, not pleading, just flat and certain, the way you tell someone tomorrow's weather. She gathered the papers with precise, unhurried movements and walked out without looking back. "Then I'll regret it. Leave Adrienne." She left. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for 5 minutes before driving away, phone pressed to her ear. Calling Brent, probably. Or Helene. Reporting that the easy method had failed. That night, Floyd called with what he'd found about Holloway Family Management, LLC. The company existed, registered in Delaware, to avoid state taxes. The establishment date made everything worse: September 12, 2024. 4 months before Wilma died. My wife was still alive when they established that company, which meant Wilma wasn't just a bystander in this timeline. She was an obstacle they had to wait out. "They set up that company 4 months before Wilma died," Floyd said over the phone, his voice carrying the weight of a conclusion we both understood. "While she was still alive, Lester. While she was still there to ask questions." I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Adrienne had cataloged my assets, where Brent had calculated his returns, where Kieran had innocently revealed plans made in other rooms. The clock on the wall read 11:30. Outside Cedar Park was dark except for streetlights. "She would have stopped them," I said. "She knew the law. 40 years as an accountant, she understood financial documentation better than most lawyers." Floyd's pause was deliberate. "So they waited." The words settled like sediment in still water. Waited. Past tense. Passive voice. As if Wilma's death was weather they'd endured rather than an opportunity they'd anticipated. "There's more," Floyd continued. "I found Brent's debt situation. He owes private lenders over $1.2 million. The number landed with physical force. High interest rates," Floyd said. 30% annually on some loans. Business ventures that failed. He's bleeding money every month. They need your assets, Lester. And they need them fast. $1.2 million. Desperation has a price point, apparently. It's the number that makes a man look at his wife's father and see a retirement account instead of family. How fast? His payment schedule shows he's 3 months from default on the largest loan. After that, bankruptcy or worse. Private lenders don't file lawsuits, they have other methods of collection. So that was the timeline. Not greed for its own sake, but desperation with a deadline. My house, my retirement account, my life insurance, all of it calculated against Brent's debt schedule. There's something particularly cruel about realizing your family waited for your wife to die before they could rob you. We talked for another hour. Floyd had more details. Helene Darnell's name appeared on the LLC paperwork as registered agent, suggesting she wasn't just aware, but actively involved. The Holloway name itself came from her mother's maiden name, a detail that suggested nostalgia or arrogance, possibly both. After I hung up, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, in the way it had been since Wilma died, not peaceful, just empty. I walked through rooms she'd chosen paint colors for past furniture we'd selected together, photos documenting 46 years of marriage that ended with a conspiracy planned before her body was cold. July brought heat that made Cedar Park shimmer in the afternoons. I'd avoided Wilma's keepsake box since the funeral. The small wooden chest she'd kept in our bedroom closet, holding letters and photos and mementos I wasn't ready to face. But Floyd's timeline revelation changed things. If they'd started planning while Wilma was alive, maybe she'd noticed. The box sat on the top shelf where it had always been dusty now. I brought it down carefully, set it on our bed, my bed now, I suppose, though I still slept on my side and left hers empty. Inside, photographs from our wedding ticket stubs, from the opera she'd loved, and I'd tolerated birthday cards. I'd written in increasingly shaky handwriting as decades passed, and underneath 3 items I'd never seen before. A handwritten letter on her personal stationery, addressed to me, dated December 15th, 2024. 1 month before she died. The first line stopped my breath. Lester, if one day Adrian asks more about money than about your health, don't take it lightly. I sat down on the bed, letter trembling slightly in my hands. I know you'll try to make excuses for her. You always do. But I've recorded it all. The questions, the dates, the pattern. I've watched her look at this house the way people look at property. They're planning to buy not a home they're visiting. I've heard her ask about life insurance 4 times. Not once has she asked how you're managing your grief, or if you're eating properly, or if you're lonely. Just money, Lester. Only money. The second item was a blue notebook, the kind Wilma used for accounting work. Inside entries in her precise handwriting, September 18, 2024. A asks about life insurance policy amount, September 24, 2024. A asks about beneficiaries on retirement account, October 3, 2024. A asks if house is fully paid off, October 12, 2024. B. Brent asks about long-term care insurance, October 30, 2024. A asks about will if it's been updated. The list continued through December. 23 entries in 4 months. All while Wilma was sick. All while she was dying. All documented in the methodical style of an accountant who knew evidence mattered. The third item was a bank document account, statements for an account I'd never seen before. My name on it. Opened October 2024 by Wilma, using her power of attorney authorization from our marriage. $50,000 transferred from our joint savings into this separate account with a handwritten note, paper-clipped to the first page. You don't know this account. I opened it privately. In your name. Just in case. If they try to claim you're incompetent, if they try to take control this money they don't know about. Floyd knows. The bank knows. Nobody else. Use it to defend yourself. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you fight. Some people protect you by standing beside you in the fight. Wilma protected me by preparing weapons I didn't know I'd need. I read the letter 3 times. Examined every entry in the blue notebook. Studied the bank documents showing an account established while she was dying, while she was supposedly too sick to think about anything except treatment and pain management. She'd known. She'd documented everything. And in her final months, while Adrian was asking about money and Brent was calculating returns, Wilma was building a defense I'd discover after she was gone. I sat in the darkness of our bedroom for a long time, her notebook in one hand, her letter in the other. Then I walked to my office, opened my old investigation notebook to a fresh page and wrote 2 words in careful block letters, Helene Darnell. Helene Darnell's name in my investigation notebook marked a shift from defense to offense. The best way to catch someone trying to prove you're incompetent is to give them exactly what they're looking for, carefully, deliberately, and on the record. Floyd understood immediately when I explained the strategy. Controlled performance, he said. Make them confident. Let them think their evidence gathering is working, while I gather evidence of my own. Dangerous game, Lester. If you act too confused, they might move faster. Emergency guardianship. Then I'll walk a careful line. July brought Adrienne to my door on a Saturday morning earlier than her usual visits. She'd brought coffee from a shop I'd never mentioned, liking small gesture, meant to look caring. actually revealing she hadn't bothered to ask what I preferred. "Morning, Dad." She let herself in without waiting for invitations, setting the coffee on my kitchen counter. "Have you had breakfast?" I stood at the stove where eggs were already frying, spatula in hand, and delivered my first deliberate performance. "What am I?" I looked at the pan, then at her, letting confusion cross my face naturally. "What am I cooking here?" Adrienne's attention sharpened instantly. "You're frying eggs, Dad." "Right. Eggs. I knew that." I turned back to the stove, moving the spatula slowly, as if rediscovering its purpose. She watched me with the intensity of someone documenting symptoms. Her phone appeared in her hand within seconds, typing rapidly. Text message, probably. To Brent or Helene, reporting this morning's evidence of decline. "Did you take your blood pressure medication?" she asked. I looked at the pill organizer on the counter, already empty for the day, because I'd taken everything at 6 a.m., same as always. But I let my gaze drift past it, uncertain. "I think so. Or was that yesterday? Dad, you need to be more careful about this." She picked up the organizer, examining it with theatrical concern. "What if you take double doses or forget entirely?" "I manage fine. Do you?" She set the organizer down with deliberate care. "You just forgot what you were cooking. You don't remember your medication." "Dad, this is exactly what I've been worried about." There it was. The setup. The narrative being constructed in real time. "Have you had breakfast?" I asked, repeating the question she'd asked me 10 minutes earlier. Her expression shifted satisfaction, mixed with something that might have been genuine worry if I didn't know about the LLC, the electronic signature attempt, the fake medical forms. She typed another text message. "I'll keep your medication for you," she said, already gathering the pill organizer and my prescription bottles from the counter. "I'll come by every day. Make sure you take the right doses." "I don't need." "Dad, please. Let me help you." Her voice carried practiced concern, probably rehearsed with Helene. "What if something happens? What if you forget and take too much?" I let her take the medications. Let her believe she was establishing necessary supervision. Let her think I was declining exactly as they'd hoped. "You spend 4 decades investigating criminals. You learn one truth: they get careless when they think their victim is helpless." After she left, I documented everything in my notebook: time, date, specific behaviors I'd performed, her immediate text message responses, her confiscation of medications. Floyd had installed a small camera above my kitchen cabinet the week before, hidden behind a decorative plate. It captured the entire performance in high definition. Exhibit: a video evidence of staged incompetence with clear documentation that medications were already taken before Adrienne's arrival. Exhibit B: Wilma's blue notebook and letter establishing pre-death awareness of conspiracy. I was building a case file using the same methodology I'd employed against criminals for 38 years. The only difference was this time the defendants were family. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text message from Kieran at 8:47 p.m. "Grandpa, I found this on Dad's computer. I don't understand it, but I saw your name." The attached screenshot showed an email draft, unsent, sitting in Brent's compose window. Subject line: "RE after approval. Recipient Helene Darnell." The text was brief, clinical, damning. "Once guardianship clears, transfer assets to Holloway Family Management within 48 hours. Texas law allows immediate access to accounts for care expenses. Liquidate the house separately. Realtor says 30-day close is realistic given market. Don't leave a trail linking transfers directly. Route through the LLC as discussed." I stared at the screenshot for a long moment. Then I called Kieran immediately. He answered on the first ring, voice quiet. "Grandpa, where are you?" "My room. Dad's downstairs with Mom and Grandma Helene. You did the right thing sending this to me. Don't tell anyone you sent it. Can you delete it from your phone now?" "Why?" "Because I need you safe and this information is dangerous." I was quiet for a moment. "Are they trying to hurt you? How do you explain to a 13-year-old that his parents are planning to rob his grandfather. They're trying to take things that belong to me, I said. But you just helped me stop them. Delete the screenshot now. And Kieran, yes, thank you. You're a good grandson. A 13-year-old boy protecting his grandfather by screenshotting evidence he doesn't fully understand. That's the kind of thing that breaks your heart and strengthens your resolve simultaneously. After we hung up, I saved the screenshot to 3 separate secure locations: encrypted cloud storage, external hard drive, and Floyd's computer. Then I opened the file Floyd had helped me set up, a digital evidence folder organized with the same structure I'd used for federal cases. I printed the email screenshot on high-quality paper that would survive years in storage if necessary. Into a clear plastic evidence sleeve, it went labeled in permanent marker with the system I'd used for 40 years, Exhibit C. The email proved specific intent. It proved timeline 48 hours after guardianship approval. It proved conspiracy coordination with Helene. It proved planned asset liquidation, the house I'd lived in for 27 years, reduced to a 30-day closed timeline. And most critically, it proved consciousness of guilt. Don't leave a trail. My grandson had just handed me the smoking gun. One smoking gun builds a case. Multiple pieces of evidence build a conviction. Texas is a one-party consent state, which meant I only needed my own permission to record conversations in my own home. Floyd helped me set up the device, small enough to hide behind books on my living room shelf, sophisticated enough to capture clear audio across the entire room. We tested it twice, adjusted placement, verified the wireless feed to my study worked properly. "You're sure about this?" Floyd asked. "They're planning to take everything. I need their own words as evidence. Once you have it, there's no going back. You'll know exactly what your daughter thinks of you." "I already know," I said. "Now I need documentation." The opportunity came on a Friday night in late July. Adrienne called that afternoon. "Dad, we're coming by tonight. All of us. We need to talk about your living situation." All of us meant Adrienne, Brent, and Helene. The triumvirate arriving together, probably to coordinate their final push. I told her 7 o'clock would be fine, hung up, and activated the recording device. They arrived exactly on time. Helene Darnell, 79 and sharp-eyed, walked through my door like she owned it. Brent followed, carrying a folder I recognized, the same fake medical forms I'd refused to sign. Adrienne came last, and for just a moment, I saw something in her expression that might have been guilt. "Dad, you should sit down," Adrienne said. "We need to discuss some important decisions." I sat in my usual chair, the one with the clearest sightline to the hidden device, and performed confusion with the precision of someone who'd practiced. "Is Kieran coming?" I asked. "No, this is adult conversation," Helene said, settling onto the couch, with the authority of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. "Lester, we're all concerned about you living alone. The medication confusion, the memory issues Adrienne mentioned." "I'm managing fine. Are you—" Brent opened his folder. "Because Adrienne tells us you forgot what you were cooking. You couldn't remember if you'd taken your medication." I let silence stretch, playing the role of someone too confused to formulate a quick defense. "I'm tired," I said finally. "I think I need to lie down." "We haven't finished," Brent started. "Let him rest," Helene interrupted, voice calculated. "We can discuss the details ourselves." I stood slowly, performed unsteadiness carefully, and retreated to my study. The wireless receiver sat on my desk, small earphones already connected. I put them in and listened. For about 30 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Helene's voice, clear and cold. "An old man living alone doesn't need $3 million. That money should be in the hands of family who knows how to use it. $3 million. The full sum of my retirement account, life insurance, and home equity calculated down to the dollar." They'd done the math precisely. "When the court declares him incapacitated," Brent said, "we transfer the funds through the company. Then sell the house. Hendricks says 30 days to close, maybe less given the market." "What about Dad?" Adrienne's voice smaller than the others. "Sunrise Manor has availability. Helene said dismissively. It's good enough for someone his age. He won't know the difference. Hearing someone discuss erasing your entire life, your home, your independence, your dignity in the same tone they'd use to discuss selling a used car does something irreversible to your heart. Mom, I don't know if... Adrienne. Helene's voice turned sharp. Your husband owes dangerous people over $1 million. Your father has $3 million sitting in accounts he barely touches. This isn't complicated mathematics. I know, but nothing. We file the petition next week. The evidence is documented. Neighbors have confirmed confusion. His own bank flagged suspicious activity we can claim he doesn't remember authorizing. The doctor I consulted will testify about age-related decline. This is happening. The recording continued for another 20 minutes. Brent detailed the asset transfer timeline. Helene discussed which judge to petition. Apparently, she knew someone in the probate court system through her church. Adrienne wasn't quiet because she was conflicted. She was quiet the way a person is quiet when everything is already decided and there is nothing left to discuss. I saved 3 copies of the audio file before they left. Exhibit E would be the full recording professionally transcribed. Early August brought Kieran to my door with his weekend backpack, looking worried in the way 13-year-olds do when they're carrying adult secrets. Grandpa, can we talk? We sat in the living room, the same room where his parents and great-grandmother had planned my erasure 2 weeks earlier. He pulled a crumpled paper from his jacket pocket, smoothing it against his knee. Dad crumpled this up and threw it away, he said. I picked it up because I saw your name on it. Blue ink, Brent's handwriting, hasty but legible. Post-guardianship timeline. Transfer liquid assets day. Retirement ACCT insurance proceeds. Sell property within 30 days max. Contact Realtor Hendricks already briefed. Deposit split, 60% debt service, 40% Holloway LLC reserve. Below that a note. L to Sunrise Manor monthly cost. $5 $800 covers legal requirement for care. My 13-year-old grandson was digging through trash cans to protect me, while the adults in his life planned to rob me. If that doesn't make you understand what real family means, nothing will. Grandpa. Kieran's voice was small. Are you really leaving the house? I put my arm around his shoulders, pulled him close the way I'd done when he was younger, and still believed adults always told the truth. No, I said. I promise you I'm not leaving this house. But Mom said, your mom is wrong, and you're helping me prove it. I took the crumpled paper gently. You're very brave bringing me this. You understand that, right? You're protecting your grandfather. He nodded against my shoulder. Can I ask you to do something difficult? What? Don't tell your parents you're helping me. Can you do that? He pulled back, looked at me with those anxious eyes that understood more than any 13-year-old should have to. Are they bad people? How do you answer that about a child's own parents? They're making bad choices, I said. There's a difference. After he left, I carefully unfolded the crumpled paper, smoothed it flat, placed it in a protective sleeve. The blue ink was clear, Brent's handwriting unmistakable. I labeled it with permanent marker Exhibit D. The file was getting thicker. But Floyd arrived at my house in August with his laptop and the expression of a man who'd uncovered something worse than he'd expected. You're going to want to sit down for this, he said. We set up in my office, the same room where I'd listened through earphones as my family planned to erase my life. Floyd opened his laptop, pulled up documents that represented weeks of investigation. Holloway Family Management, LLC, he said, turning the screen toward me. Registered in Delaware to avoid state taxes. Here's what I found: 0 employees, 0 operations, 0 clients, no business activity whatsoever. Shell company. Exactly. This company exists for one purpose: to receive money and distribute it quietly. But here's what you need to know. Floyd clicked to another document. The bank account holder isn't Brent. I looked at the account authorization form he'd obtained through channels I probably shouldn't ask about. The signature was familiar, precise, controlled, the handwriting of someone who'd signed legal documents for decades. "It's Helene Darnell," I said. "Your mother-in-law controls everything. Brent's the front man, Adrienne's the petitioner, but Helene holds the money." Floyd pulled up another file. "And Lester, she's done this before." The document was a court record from Oklahoma, 2010. Estate of Harold Brennan versus Darnell and Associates. Helene was unofficial legal counsel for plaintiffs seeking guardianship of an 82-year-old man, Floyd explained. Same pattern: adult children claiming incompetence, questions about memory and confusion, emergency financial management needed. The guardianship petition was ultimately dismissed, but not before Harold Brennan spent $40,000 on legal fees defending himself. What happened to him? Died 6 months later. Heart attack officially. But he'd lost most of his savings fighting the case. His children got what was left through probate anyway. Floyd's voice was grim. Helene wasn't charged because they couldn't prove she orchestrated it. She was just an advisor, a family friend offering guidance. But the pattern was there. Learning that the person orchestrating your family's betrayal is a repeat offender who successfully did this to someone else's family 15 years ago, that changes the entire equation from family dysfunction to predatory crime. "She waited until Wilma died," I said, "because Wilma would have recognized this, would have known what Helene was doing. Your wife was probably the only person who ever stood up to her mother." Floyd closed his laptop. Now Helene's found a son-in-law desperate enough to be useful, and a granddaughter conflicted enough to be manipulated. And she's targeting the same money she probably thought should have been Wilma's all along. The pieces assembled themselves into clear pattern, not family concern, but calculated predation, not spontaneous greed, but experienced methodology. Helene wasn't just involved, she was the architect. "They're going to file soon," Floyd said. "Probably within weeks. All the evidence gathering, all the neighbor interviews, all the medication concerns, that's preparation for the petition. Once it's filed, you'll have limited time to respond. Then we'll be ready." Floyd looked at me with something between respect and concern. "You're planning to represent yourself?" "I spent 40 years investigating this exact crime. I know the patterns, I know the tactics, I know how to document evidence. Who better to defend me than myself? Judges don't like self-representation in guardianship cases. They think it proves incompetence. Then I'll prove otherwise." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, official seal of Travis County Court in the upper left corner. My hands didn't shake when I opened it. 40 years of federal service meant I'd seen hundreds of legal documents, understood their language, knew their weight. In the matter of the guardianship of Lester Whitfield, an alleged incapacitated person. Petitioner Adrienne Harrington. Hearing scheduled for November 6, 2025 at 9 a.m. Alleged incapacitated person. 4 words that reduced 73 years of life, 4 decades of federal service, and 46 years of marriage into a legal designation, suggesting I couldn't manage my own affairs. An hour after the summons arrived, Adrienne appeared at my door. No phone call warning. No text message preparation. Just my daughter standing on the porch, where she'd played as a child, where Wilma had taken photos of her before prom, where we'd celebrated her college graduation. "Dad," she said, "I want to explain. You filed a guardianship petition. I'm doing this for you. You're alone, you need someone to help manage things, to make sure you're safe." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, searching for the girl who'd asked me to teach her chess, who'd called me from college when she was homesick, who'd cried at her mother's funeral. She was still there, somewhere beneath the calculation and the desperation and Helene's manipulation. But not enough to matter. "No, Adrienne," I said, voice cold and precise. "You did it for the money. Brent owes over $1 million. Helene convinced you this was the solution. And you chose to believe that taking everything from your father was somehow protection rather than theft. Her face went through several expressions: surprise, denial, guilt, defensiveness. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Dad, I see you in court," I said, and closed the door. There comes a moment when you stop hoping your child will remember who you are and start accepting that you need to defend yourself from who they've become. I stood in the hallway for a long time after she left, looking at the family photos on the wall. Adrienne at 5, gap-toothed and laughing. Adrienne at 16, rolling her eyes at my camera. Adrienne at her wedding, Wilma crying happy tears beside me. All of it real, all of it true, and none of it enough to stop what was happening now. I walked into my office, sat down at my computer, and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked steadily as I began typing "motion to represent self in guardianship proceeding, District Court of Travis County, Texas. 40 years investigating fraud, and now I'd defend myself using every lesson I'd ever learned." The motion to represent myself was the first step. Texas law requires one thing before any guardianship trial can proceed: an independent psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed physician. The notice arrived 2 weeks after I filed my self-representation paperwork. October 15th, 2025, 9 a.m. Office of Dr. Margaret Holbrook. Mandatory attendance. Evaluation results to be submitted directly to the court, with copies distributed to all parties. This was the assessment Adrienne couldn't control. Not a neighbor she'd coached, not a doctor Helene had consulted, but a court-appointed psychiatrist who'd evaluated hundreds of guardianship cases with no stake in the outcome. Dr. Margaret Holbrook's office occupied the 3rd floor of a medical building in Austin, bright and neutral in the way designed to put people at ease without being cheerful. Dr. Holbrook herself, a court-appointed psychiatrist in her mid-50s, had the calm professionalism of someone who'd evaluated hundreds of guardianship cases and knew exactly what incompetence actually looked like. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, "this evaluation will take approximately an hour. I'll be assessing cognitive function, memory, judgment, and decision-making capacity. There are no right or wrong answers. I'm simply establishing a baseline of your current mental state." "I understand." She began with basic orientation questions: date, location, current events. Then moved to memory recall, word lists she'd give me and ask me to repeat 5 minutes later, historical dates, personal timeline verification. "Can you tell me what you had for breakfast this morning?" "Oatmeal with blueberries, black coffee. I ate at 6:15. And yesterday morning, same breakfast, 6:20. I was running a few minutes late because I'd been reviewing court documents." She made notes without expression, moved to the next section. Spatial orientation, drawing clock faces, identifying objects, following multi-step instructions. Financial awareness. Could I explain my current assets, monthly expenses, how I managed accounts? "I have approximately $700,000 in my federal retirement account," I said. $420,000 in home equity based on the most recent appraisal. Monthly expenses average $2,300, including property tax, utilities, groceries, and insurance. I manage accounts through online banking, reconcile statements monthly, and maintain detailed records." "How long have you managed your own finances?" 55 years, since I was 18 and opened my first checking account." More questions followed about my career, my daily routine, my understanding of why I was here. She asked about Adrienne's petition, about my response, about my decision to represent myself. "Do you understand the guardianship process, Mr. Whitfield?" "I do. My daughter claims I'm incapable of managing my own affairs due to cognitive decline. If the court agrees, a guardian, likely her, would be appointed to control my finances and make decisions about my living situation. I would lose legal autonomy over my own life." "And why did you choose to represent yourself rather than hire an attorney?" "Because I spent 38 years investigating financial fraud for the federal government. I know how to document evidence, build a case, and present facts. This conspiracy against me is exactly the kind of case I investigated dozens of times in my career. When you've spent 40 years remembering case details, witness statements, and financial records with precision, a memory test from a psychiatrist feels almost routine. Dr. Holbrook conducted cognitive exercises, problem-solving scenarios, ethical dilemmas, judgment calls about hypothetical situations. She asked me to explain complex decisions I'd made recently, to walk through my reasoning process. An hour later, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Mr. Whitfield, I'll be frank with you. This is one of the clearest assessments I've ever conducted for a guardianship case." She tapped her notes. "Awareness, memory, judgment, spatial orientation, all within normal limits for a healthy man your age. In fact, your recall and analytical reasoning test higher than average. When will your report be available? I'll submit it to the court today." Both sides receive copies automatically within 48 hours. She paused. "I can't discuss the specifics of your family situation, but I can tell you that nothing in this evaluation supports a claim of incapacity." I thanked her and left. The October sun was bright against my eyes as I walked to my car. Somewhere across town, Adrienne was probably preparing for the report she expected to validate her narrative. She'd gathered evidence of my supposed confusion, coached herself to believe I was declining, built an entire case around the assumption that a court-appointed psychiatrist would confirm what she wanted to be true. The report arrived at my house 2 days later in an official envelope. I read it carefully, professionally detached, despite it being an assessment of my own mind. Cognitive status. Evidence of dementia, delirium, or significant cognitive impairment. Patient demonstrates intact memory, appropriate judgment, and clear understanding of personal and financial affairs. Able to articulate complex reasoning and demonstrate capacity for independent decision-making. Recommendation based on this evaluation. I find no psychiatric basis for guardianship. Mr. Whitfield demonstrates full capacity to manage his own affairs. I learned later that Adrienne received her copy the same afternoon. Floyd had a contact in Victor Prescott's office, a paralegal who'd worked fraud cases with us years ago. She called him within an hour of Adrienne's panic call to Victor. According to Floyd's contact, Adrienne had read the report twice, disbelieving, then immediately called her attorney. "How did this happen?" she'd asked Victor, voice rising. "He forgets things. He gets confused. I documented everything." Victor's response had been measured professional. "The psychiatric evaluation results are not in our favor. Your father has been confirmed to have sufficient cognitive ability. We'll need to adjust our strategy." Adjust how? Instead of cognitive inability, we argue undue influence from third parties. Someone else controlling his decisions, manipulating him against family. It's a harder case to prove, but it's our path forward now. There's a particular satisfaction in watching someone's false narrative collapse under the weight of professional assessment, especially when that someone is your own daughter. I filed Dr. Holbrook's report as Exhibit F in my growing case file. The psychiatric evaluation destroyed Adrienne's primary argument. She'd claimed I couldn't manage my own affairs, couldn't make sound decisions, needed supervision for my own protection. A court-appointed expert had just stated in language no judge could ignore that I was fully competent. But I knew Victor Prescott well enough from research to know he wouldn't give up, he'd simply change tactics. The question was, what would their new strategy be? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Victor Prescott called an emergency meeting at his Westlake Hills office the day after the psychiatric report arrived. I learned about it within hours. Floyd's paralegal contact had become an invaluable source of information about the opposing side's movements. The meeting included Adrienne and Brent seated across Victor's mahogany desk in an office designed to project success and confidence. According to Floyd's contact, Victor had opened with the blunt assessment lawyers give when a case shifts against them. The psychiatric evaluation eliminated our primary argument, he'd told them. We're changing direction. Instead of cognitive inability, we argue undue influence, that your father is being manipulated by third parties, making financial decisions that don't reflect his true will. Manipulated by who? Adrienne had asked. Floyd Townsend. Denise Bentley at the bank. Anyone with regular access who might be steering his decisions against family interests. Victor's voice had been measured professional. It's a different argument, but it's viable. Can we still win this? The question had come out uncertain, Adrienne's confidence finally cracking. Victor's response told me everything I needed to know. I think we have sufficient arguments to present to the court. Not yes, not will win, just sufficient arguments to present. When a lawyer carefully says he has sufficient arguments to present, instead of will win, you know he's already calculating how to minimize the loss. Brent had pushed for timeline confirmation. How fast could this proceed? Victor had confirmed the trial date, November 6, 2025. 2 weeks away. Floyd called me with this information that evening. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where this had all started, with Adrienne's questions about life insurance, and planned my final countermove. They're going to argue you're being influenced, Floyd said. That I'm manipulating you, that Denise is making unauthorized decisions about your accounts, which gives us an opportunity. What are you thinking? A honeypot. Floyd smiled, the expression of a man who'd run federal sting operations for 20 years. Elaborate. We create a decoy account. False information showing a higher balance. Linked account details that look legitimate but aren't. I leave a statement visible during Brent's next visit. If he tries to access it, we have a digital trail documenting attempted fraud. Floyd nodded slowly. The bank will need to approve it. Denise's legal department already did. I called her this morning. They classified it as a legitimate fraud investigation, which it is. We set the trap carefully. Denise created a dummy account statement showing $900,000, enough to be tempting, different enough from my actual balance to be identifiable. The account number was real, but dormant, monitored by the bank's fraud prevention system. Any access attempt would trigger immediate alerts and comprehensive logging, IP address, device, fingerprints, timestamps, password attempts. Brent visited on a Saturday afternoon, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming trial. Adrienne didn't come, according to Brent. She was too upset to face me. He sat in my living room making small talk that felt scripted while I excused myself to the kitchen. The bank statement sat on my coffee table, where I'd left it folded to show just enough information to be intriguing. Account ending in 8934. Balance $923,847.19. Access code visible on the corner. I took my time making coffee. When I returned, Brent was still on the couch, phone in his hand, expression casual. But the statement had shifted just slightly, the fold different from how I'd left it. Coffee, I offered. No thanks, I need to get going. He stood pocketing his phone. I just wanted to check on you before things get formal. See you in court then. After he left, I called Denise. The bait is set. Monitor everything. Already on it. Any access attempts will trigger immediate alerts. The alert came at 11:17 p.m. that night. I was still awake reading case files when my phone buzzed with Denise's text. Honeypot triggered. Multiple access attempts. Calling morning. She called at 8 a.m. the next day, voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd just caught exactly what she'd been hunting. Mr. Whitfield, someone tried accessing that account last night at 11 p.m. 3 failed password attempts from the same IP address. Westlake Hills, exactly. Same residential address we flagged from the first unauthorized attempt. She paused. The device fingerprint matches a laptop registered to Brent Harrington. He photographed your statement, went home and tried to access the account 3 times before giving up. Oh, honeypot in cybersecurity is bait, designed to catch criminals. Turns out it works just as well for catching family members trying to steal your retirement account. How complete is the digital trail, I asked. Comprehensive. IP address with timestamp, device ID and MAC address. Failed password entries. He tried variations of your birthday and Wilma's name. Screenshots of the login page showing the account number he entered. Everything logged and preserved. Send me the full report. Email with encrypted attachment, already prepared. And Mr. Whitfield, this is the second documented unauthorized access attempt from the same device. First was the retirement account link request in June. Now this. Pattern of behavior, which proves intent. Exactly. The email arrived within an hour. I printed every page: access logs, IP address, verification device, fingerprints, password, attempt records, timestamp documentation, showing 11:17 p.m. on a Saturday night, when Brent should have been home with his family, but instead was trying to access an account that didn't belong to him. The logs were precise, technical, irrefutable. Each failed password attempt captured and preserved. The device information linking directly to Brent's personal laptop. The IP address matching his home in Westlake Hills. Timestamps showing he'd attempted access within 6 hours of seeing the statement in my living room. Into the evidence sleeve, it went labeled in permanent marker Exhibit E. The trial was 13 days away, and I had just documented attempted theft. I sat in my office looking at the growing file of exhibits. Exhibit A: video of staged incompetence with timestamp proving medications already taken. Exhibit B: Wilma's documentation of the conspiracy. Exhibit C: Kieran's screenshot of the transfer timeline email. Exhibit D: Brent's handwritten property sale notes. Exhibit E: digital forensics of attempted account fraud. Each piece built on the others, creating a comprehensive picture of conspiracy, fraud, and betrayal. Not family dysfunction. Not misunderstanding. Criminal activity documented with the precision of a federal investigation. Now I just needed to survive those 13 days without them discovering what I knew. Those 13 days passed in careful preparation, and I arrived at Travis County Courthouse at 7:30 on the morning of November 6th, carrying my briefcase and 38 years of experience they knew nothing about. The courthouse steps were damp with early morning dew, yellow leaves scattered across concrete from the oak trees lining the street. November in Texas meant cool mornings that would turn warm by afternoon, the kind of weather that felt appropriate for endings and beginnings. I saw them as soon as I entered the building: Adrian standing beside Brent near the security checkpoint, Victor Prescott, in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. They were conferring quietly, heads together, the posture of people confident in their strategy. Victor noticed me first. He straightened, offered a professional nod. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, voice carrying across the marble hallway. "I understand you've chosen to represent yourself. That is certainly your right." The pause after right was calculated, implying foolishness without stating it directly. Professional courtesy masking judgment. Adrienne stepped forward before Brent could speak. She looked at me the way you look at someone you've already written off. "No lawyer, Dad." "Then just give up now and save everyone the time." Her voice was calm. Not cruel the way a stranger is cruel, the way only family can be, because she knew exactly what those words would cost me to hear. Brent said nothing. He didn't need to. She had already said everything. Then Adrienne laughed. Not a nervous giggle, not an uncomfortable sound, but a full laugh that echoed between marble walls and high ceilings. My daughter, 42 years old, standing in a courthouse where she'd petitioned to take control of my life, laughing at the idea that I might defend myself. When someone laughs at you in a courthouse hallway, they're not just mocking you, they're announcing to everyone present that they believe your defeat is inevitable. I walked past them without responding. My briefcase felt solid in my hand, heavy with evidence they didn't know existed. The courtroom doors were already open. I was the first to enter. The room was smaller than television makes courtrooms seem. Wood paneling, 2 tables facing the judge's bench, gallery seating for maybe 40 people. I set my briefcase at the defendant's table, though. In guardianship cases, there are no true defendants, just family members fighting over control. People filed in slowly. Floyd arrived at 8, took a seat in the first row behind me. Joanne Stafford came next, my neighbor, who'd warned me about Adrienne's evidence gathering. Denise from the bank. A few others I recognized from the neighborhood faces that showed support without words. Adrienne, Brent, and Victor took their positions at the opposing table. Helene Darnell entered at 8:45 wearing a navy suit and the expression of someone who'd orchestrated this entire performance. She sat directly behind Adrienne, close enough to whisper guidance. At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff called the courtroom to order. All rise. The Honorable Judge Nathaniel Dalton presiding. Judge Dalton entered through the door behind the bench 62 with the gravity of a former federal prosecutor. He settled into his chair, arranged papers before him, and looked out across the courtroom with neutral professionalism. In the matter of guardianship of Lester Whitfield, he said, petitioner Adrienne Harrington represented by Victor Prescott. Respondent Lester Whitfield appearing pro se. A pause. Counselor Prescott, your opening statement. Victor stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and approached the center of the courtroom with the confidence of someone who'd won cases like this before. Your Honor, this case concerns an elderly man living alone following the death of his wife. A man whose isolation has left him vulnerable to influence from those around him, friends, associates, bank employees, who may not have his best interests at heart. Victor's voice was measured, reasonable. The petitioner, his daughter, seeks only to ensure proper oversight of financial decisions that have become increasingly concerning. He spoke for 15 minutes. Painted a picture of vulnerability, of risky decisions of a daughter worried about her aging father. He emphasized my choice to represent myself as evidence of the very risk Adrienne sought to address. What competent person facing guardianship proceedings wouldn't hire an attorney? It was a good argument, professional, compelling if you didn't know the truth. But Judge Dalton wasn't looking at Victor. He was reading. The personnel file lay open on his bench, the thick folder documenting my federal career that Adrienne's legal team had subpoenaed months ago, probably expecting it to show routine government employment. Page after page of case files, commendations, investigations, summaries. Judge Dalton turned pages slowly, while Victor spoke about my alleged incompetence. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly neutral, becoming thoughtful, becoming something else entirely. Victor finished his opening, returned to his seat, looking satisfied. Mr. Whitfield, Judge Dalton said, still reading. Your opening statement. I stood. Every person in that courtroom expected a long, rambling defense, an elderly man fumbling through legal language he didn't understand. Your Honor, I said, I'll let the evidence speak for itself. I sat down. The courtroom was silent for 3 full seconds. Adrienne leaned toward Victor, whispering something urgent. Brent's confident expression flickered. Judge Dalton turned another page in my file. Then another. His eyebrows rose slightly as he read something that made him pause, read again, continue. There's a particular satisfaction in watching a judge's face change as he reads page after page of credentials the opposing side never bothered to investigate. Mr. Whitfield, the judge said, still looking at the file. It says here you spent 38 years with the federal government investigating financial fraud. Yes, Your Honor. And you conducted over 200 investigations into guardianship fraud, elder financial abuse, and fraudulent power of attorney schemes. 217, Your Honor. Judge Dalton looked up. Not at Victor. At me. Really looked at me for the first time, seeing not an elderly man in need of protection, but a federal investigator who'd built cases against people exactly like the ones now trying to take control of his life. Victor Prescott's confident expression had frozen. Adrienne's hand found Brent's arm gripping it. Judge Dalton set down the file and looked across the courtroom, not at Victor, at me. His voice, when he spoke next, was somehow different from how it had sounded earlier, carrying a weight that made Victor pause mid-thought. "Proceed, counselor." Victor Prescott called his first witness that afternoon, and I recognized her immediately, my neighbor Joanne Stafford, the woman who'd warned me months ago. She was sworn in looking uncomfortable, her hand trembling slightly on the Bible. Victor approached with the careful sympathy lawyers use when they want to appear compassionate. "Mrs. Stafford, how long have you been Mr. Whitfield's neighbor?" 15 years. "And in recent months, particularly following his wife's death, did you observe any changes in his social interaction?" Joanne glanced at me, then away. "He seemed more isolated. I saw him less than before, less frequently than when his wife was alive." "Yes. Did he appear to have regular social contact visits from family, beyond his daughter's occasional check-ins?" "Not that I observed, no." Victor nodded, satisfied. "Thank you, Mrs. Stafford." He returned to his seat, confident he'd established the narrative of an isolated elderly man. Judge Dalton looked at me. "Cross-examination, Mr. Whitfield." I stood, picked up a folder from my briefcase. "Mrs. Stafford, you mentioned observing me appearing isolated in recent months. Can you tell me specifically which days you observed this?" She hesitated. "I don't remember exact dates." "Please try. It's important." "Well, there were several times in July and August. Maybe 3 or 4 occasions when I noticed your car was always in the driveway, lights on at odd hours." "Can you be more specific? Which weeks in July?" "The second week, I think, and the last week of the month." "And in August?" "Early August, around the 10th or 12th. I opened my folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence federal consultation assignment records from the Department of Treasury." Victor sat up straighter. "Objection. Relevance." "It's directly relevant to the witness's testimony," I said. Judge Dalton examined the documents I handed him. "Overruled. Proceed." I turned back to Joanne. "Mrs. Stafford, do you know where I was July 9th through 15th? "No. Phoenix, Arizona, consulting on a financial oversight case for the federal government." "And July 24th through 30th. Her face was beginning to flush. "I wouldn't know." "Denver, Colorado. Same consultation work. August 8th through 14th. I must have been mistaken about the dates. These are federal assignment records with flight confirmations, hotel receipts, and work logs. On every single date you mentioned observing me isolated at home, I was actually conducting financial consultation work in other states. There's a particular sound a courtroom makes when everyone realizes simultaneously that a witness just destroyed their own credibility. It's a collective intake of breath." "I must have confused the dates," Joanne said quietly. "I'm sorry." "No further questions." Victor stood for redirect, tried to salvage the testimony by asking about general impressions rather than specific dates, but the damage was done. His first witness had just proven that the opposing party's evidence was unreliable at best, fabricated at worst. Joanne stepped down, looking miserable. I felt bad for her. She'd been coached by Adrienne to remember things a certain way, and now she'd been exposed. But this wasn't about making people feel comfortable. It was about truth. Court adjourned for the day. I packed my briefcase while Victor conferred urgently with Adrienne and Brent in the hallway. Helene sat motionless in the gallery, her expression unreadable. "Before I reveal what I told the judge about why I chose to represent myself, are you still here?" Comment. If you think it's about control, B. If it's about being heard, add one reason why. Note, the next part contains dramatized details for storytelling. The lesson is what I hope stays with you. The next morning, November 4th, Judge Dalton called court to order earlier than expected. I was already seated when Adrienne and her legal team arrived, looking less confident than the day before. "Before we continue with testimony," Judge Dalton said, looking directly at me, "I want to ask a question publicly so both sides can hear the answer." The courtroom went silent. Mr. Whitfield, why did you choose to represent yourself in this matter? It wasn't a procedural question. It was genuine curiosity from a man who'd spent his career watching people navigate the legal system and understood that self-representation in a guardianship case was unusual for someone with my background. I stood. Every eye in the courtroom was on me. Adrienne, Brent, Helene, Victor. The gallery behind them, Floyd, in the front row. Your Honor, there are many practical reasons. I have experience with legal proceedings. I understand evidence documentation. I know how to build a case. I paused, looking at Adrienne. But the real reason is this: my daughter and her family have spent years telling other people who I am, telling neighbors I'm confused, telling bank employees I'm declining, telling each other I'm incapable. Today in this courtroom, for the first time in a very long time, they have to sit down and listen. The silence that followed was profound. Not uncomfortable profound. The kind of silence that happens when truth lands with weight that can't be dismissed. Judge Dalton nodded once, slowly, meaningfully. Even Victor Prescott paused, pen hovering over his legal pad. Adrienne looked down at the table in front of her, and for just a moment I saw something in her expression that might have been shame. Sometimes the most devastating statement in a courtroom isn't about evidence or law. It's about being seen as human after years of being invisible. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, Judge Dalton said quietly. Counselor Prescott, you may call your next witness. But Victor didn't call another witness immediately. Instead, he returned to his table and opened his laptop. For the first time since trial began, he pulled up my full personnel file, not glancing, reading every page. His confidence hadn't vanished entirely, but something had changed. I was finally taking me seriously. Victor spent the lunch recess reading my file with the focus of someone who'd underestimated an opponent and was scrambling to catch up. The afternoon session gave me my first opportunity to present evidence, and I called Denise Bentley to the witness stand. She was sworn in looking professional and composed the way someone who testifies regularly in fraud cases should look. I approached with my folder of exhibits. Ms. Bentley, you manage fraud prevention at Austin Community Credit Union, correct? Yes, and I'm a customer there holding both standard accounts and my federal retirement fund. That's correct. In June of this year, did you notice any suspicious activity regarding my retirement account? Denise opened her own folder. Yes. On June 14th, there was a request to link your retirement account to an external account. The electronic signature was properly formatted, but it didn't match your usual confirmation pattern. What did the metadata show? The login device metadata showed a Westlake Hills residential area IP address, not your Cedar Park location. What action did you take? I froze the request immediately and contacted you directly. I turned to face the courtroom. That Westlake Hills address, did you verify the specific location? Yes. We traced it to a residential address on Barton Creek Boulevard. That's my son-in-law, Brent Harrington's home address. That's not... Brent started to rise from his chair. Mr. Harrington, sit down, Judge Dalton said sharply. You'll have your turn to testify if your attorney calls you. Brent sat, but his face had changed. The confident mockery from the courthouse hallway replaced with something that looked like panic. I continued. Ms. Bentley was there. Another incident. Yes. On October 21st, at 11:07 p.m., someone attempted to access a different account, one we'd set up as a fraud detection measure. Can you describe what happened? The same Westlake Hills IP address attempted login. 3 failed password attempts using variations of your birthday and your late wife's name. After the 3rd failure, the user gave up. We captured full digital logs, device fingerprints, timestamps, login page screenshots. 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. Correct. When someone attempts fraud at 11 p.m. thinking nobody's watching, they don't realize digital systems never sleep and never forget. Every keystroke leaves a permanent trail. Your Honor, I'd like to enter these digital forensic reports as evidence exhibits F and G. Victor objected on procedural grounds, but Judge Dalton reviewed the documents and allowed them. The reports were comprehensive, technical, irrefutable. 2 separate documented attempts to access my accounts from Brent's home months apart showing pattern and intent. Thank you, Ms. Bentley. No further questions. Victor's cross-examination tried to suggest the IP address could be spoofed or that someone else might have used Brent's internet connection. But Denise calmly explained that the device fingerprints matched Brent's personal laptop registered in his name with his unique machine ID. The damage was done. Documented attempted fraud twice with digital evidence that couldn't be explained away. Court recessed for the day. That night, I prepared for the next morning's testimony, the evidence that would expose not just the attempts, but the entire conspiracy structure. November 5th arrived cold and clear. Floyd Townsend took the witness stand at 9:30 a.m. and I walked him through his investigation of Holloway Family Management, LLC. Mr. Townsend, can you describe this company's structure? Floyd opened his laptop, displayed corporate records on the courtroom screen. Holloway Family Management, LLC was registered in Delaware on September 12, 2024. According to state filings, it has 0 employees, 0 operations, and 0 clients. What was its purpose? Based on the financial structure analysis, this company was designed to receive a large sum at once and distribute it across sub-accounts. Classic shell company architecture for elder financial abuse cases. Who controls the company's bank account? Floyd pulled up another document. That's where it gets interesting. The bank account holder isn't Brent Harrington. It's Helene Darnell. In the gallery, Helene's posture stiffened. This was the first time her name had been spoken aloud in connection with the financial conspiracy. And when was this company established? September 2024, 4 months before your wife passed away. The timeline was damning. They'd built the infrastructure to steal my assets, while Wilma was still alive waiting for her death to begin execution. I introduced the next exhibit, the money transfer draft plan, that Kieran had photographed from Brent's computer, enhanced by discovery from Victor's own files. The document was projected on the courtroom screen. Detailed timeline for transferring my retirement fund to Holloway LLC within 48 hours of guardianship approval. Asset liquidation schedule. Property sale coordination with a realtor already briefed. Distribution percentages 60% to debt service, 40% to LLC reserve. And at the bottom, in blue ink, Adrian's signature. This is slander. Adrian jumped up, voice sharp and desperate. You're making things up. I turned to face her, calm and direct. No, Adrian. Your signature is slandering you. The courtroom was silent, except for her breathing. She looked at Victor, who gestured for her to sit down. She did, slowly staring at the screen, showing her own handwriting, planning the systematic theft of everything I owned. There's something particularly devastating about watching your daughter see her own signature on documents, planning your financial destruction. Her face recognizing what she signed months ago. This document, I said to Floyd, still on the stand, outlines the complete conspiracy. Not just taking guardianship, but the specific timeline and method for converting all my assets to cash and transferring them through a shell company controlled by Helene Darnell. That's correct, Floyd said. This is consistent with the guardianship fraud patterns we investigated together for 2 decades. Build the legal justification, secure court authority, execute immediate transfers before anyone can intervene. Victor attempted cross-examination, suggesting the documents could be fabricated or taken out of context, but the signature was verified. The LLC registration was public record, and the pattern was unmistakable. Judge Dalton took notes, his pen moving steadily across the page. Helene Darnell sat motionless in the gallery, her hands gripping her handbag so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She hadn't looked up since Floyd mentioned her name on the LLC account. Helene didn't look up the rest of that session, sitting motionless, while the evidence mounted. The next evidence I presented was something they never imagined I possessed, their own words captured and preserved. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce two final pieces of evidence for today. I pulled up the email screenshot on the courtroom display, the one Kieran had photographed from Brent's computer and sent me months ago. This email was legally obtained when my grandson saw it open on his father's computer and took a screenshot. Subject line RE after approval. Text reads, "Once guardianship clears transfer assets to Holloway Family Management within 48 hours. Texas law allows immediate access to accounts for care expenses. Liquidate the property separately. Realtor says 30-day close is realistic. Don't leave a trail linking transfers directly." The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Judge Dalton's pen moving across his notepad. And the second piece of evidence, I said, connecting my phone to the courtroom's audio system, is a recording made in my Cedar Park living room on July 26, 2025. Victor stood. Your Honor, recordings made without consent. Texas is a one-party consent state counselor, Judge Dalton said. If Mr. Whitfield recorded a conversation in his own home where he was present, it's admissible. Proceed. I pressed play. The audio quality was clear. Floyd had helped me set up good equipment. Helene Darnell's voice filled the courtroom, precise and cold. An old man living alone doesn't need $3 million. That money should be in the hands of family who knows how to use it. Brent's voice followed. When the court declares him incapacitated, we transfer the funds through the company. Then sell the house. Then, Adrian quieter, what about Dad? Helene again dismissive. Sunrise Manor has availability. It's good enough for someone his age. He won't know the difference. Hearing your own daughter's mother-in-law discuss your life like a business transaction that needs liquidating. There's no preparation for how that feels echoing through a courtroom. The recording continued for another minute. Discussions of asset distribution, timeline coordination, which judge to petition. Every word documented, preserved, undeniable. When it ended, the silence was profound. Helene stood up abruptly. This is a family matter. You had no right. Sit down, Mrs. Darnell, Judge Dalton said sharply. This is a court of law, not a family dinner. You'll have your opportunity to testify if called. Until then, remain seated and silent. For the first time since I'd known her, Helene had no response. She sat, her face rigid, hands still gripping that handbag. I let the silence hold for a moment before continuing. Your Honor, I have one more exhibit. This one is personal, and it's difficult for me to present, but it's necessary. I pulled the clear plastic sleeve from my briefcase. Inside was Wilma's letter, the one she'd written a month before she died, and the blue notebook where she'd documented every suspicious question Adrienne had asked during her final illness. My wife Wilma passed away in January of this year. After her death, I found a keepsake box in our bedroom closet containing items I'd never seen before. This letter was one of them. I held it carefully, my wife's handwriting still clear on the page. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to read a portion of this letter aloud. Judge Dalton nodded. I began reading, and my voice wasn't entirely steady for the first time in the trial. Lester, if one day Adrienne asks more about money than about your health, don't take it lightly. I know you'll try to make excuses for her. You always do. But I've recorded it all. The questions, the dates, the pattern. I've watched her look at this house the way people look at property. They're planning to buy, not a home they're visiting. I paused, looked up at Adrienne. She wasn't looking back. Her head was bowed, shoulders trembling. The notebook I'm entering as evidence contains 23 entries from September through December 2024. Each one documents a time Adrienne asked about life insurance, retirement accounts, the house value, or my will. All while Wilma was dying. All documented in the precise handwriting of an accountant who understood that evidence matters. I set the letter down gently on the evidence table. My wife is no longer here to testify, but she left enough to speak for her. Sometimes the most powerful witness in a courtroom is someone who isn't there anymore, someone who saw the truth and wrote it down before they could be silenced. The courtroom was completely silent. Not the silence of shock or surprise, but the profound quiet that comes when something true and painful has been spoken aloud. Adrienne's shoulders shook. She didn't make a sound, but I could see her crying, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since this began. Brent sat rigid beside her, not offering comfort. Helene stared straight ahead, her face a mask. Judge Dalton looked at the letter at the notebook at me. "Mr. Whitfield," he said quietly, "I think this is an appropriate place to adjourn for the day. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The gavel fell softly. People began gathering their things, the usual shuffle and murmur of a courtroom emptying. But something was different. The conversations were quieter. People moved more slowly. Floyd touched my shoulder as he passed. "You did well," I nodded, not trusting my voice. Presenting Wilma's letter had cost me more than I'd expected. Reading her words aloud, seeing the evidence of how she'd protected me even in death, it opened something I'd been keeping carefully closed. As the courtroom gradually emptied, Adrienne remained in her seat. Brent had stood and walked out without looking back. Helene had left minutes before, handbag clutched tight, spine straight with false dignity. Adrienne stood, straightened her jacket, and walked out. Not toward me. Not toward Brent. Not toward Helene. Just out, as if this had been a business meeting that hadn't gone her way and she had others to attend. That night, I slept poorly, seeing Adrienne's face as I'd walked past. But some distances can't be crossed in a single day, and November 6th arrived whether I was ready or not. The judge's gavel struck once at 9 a.m., and a small voice from the back row broke the silence. "Your Honor, may I speak?" All heads turned. Kieran Harrington, 13 years old, stood beside the bailiff in the back of the courtroom, his shoulders squared, despite hands that trembled visibly even from where I sat. He wore a button-down shirt that looked too formal, too adult, the kind of thing a child wears when he knows something important is about to happen. This was the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. My grandson caught between the adults who should have protected him, choosing to tell the truth. Judge Dalton looked at Kieran with the careful attention judges reserve for children in courtrooms. "Young man, what's your name?" "Kieran Harrington, sir." I'm his grandson." Kieran pointed at me. "And you have something you wish to say to the court?" "Yes, sir. I heard things about Grandpa. Things I think you should know." Victor Prescott stood quickly. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The witness list was submitted by both parties," Judge Dalton said. "Mr. Whitfield, did you intend to call your grandson?" I stood. "I listed him as a potential witness, Your Honor. I left the choice to him whether he wanted to testify." The judge studied Kieran for a long moment. "Son, do you understand what it means to testify, to tell the truth under oath?" "Yes, sir. It means I have to tell what really happened, even if it's hard. And nobody is forcing you to do this." "No, sir. Grandpa said I could choose. I'm choosing." Judge Dalton nodded slowly. "Bailiff, swear in the witness." Kieran's hand shook as he placed it on the Bible, but his voice was clear. "I do." He took the witness stand, and I saw how small he looked. There, a child in a space designed for adults, about to expose the adults who'd used him. "Kieran," I said gently, "can you tell the court about a conversation you overheard between your grandmother, Helene, and your mother?" "You mean great-grandma Helene?" "Yes." Kieran took a breath. "It was at her house. Mom and great-grandma were in the kitchen. I was getting water. They didn't know I was there." "When was this?" "October 3rd. I remember because it was the day Mom said we had to go to great-grandma's for an important meeting. The same day, Adrienne had filed the guardianship petition." "What did you hear?" Kieran's hands gripped the witness stand rail, child-sized fingers, white-knuckled against polished wood that had absorbed decades of sworn testimony. His voice cracked on the word, grandmother. And for 3 seconds, the only sound in the courtroom was the ventilation system's low hum. "Great-grandma said, 'The house won't belong to your grandfather after this trial. Once the court puts you in charge, we move quickly.' And Mom said something about feeling bad. And great-grandma said—" He paused, swallowed. She said, "The boy is the best reason for court sympathy. Judges always trust children. Use him." The courtroom was utterly silent. "Did you understand what she meant?" I asked quietly. "I understood she wanted Mom to use me to make the judge feel sorry for us. To make it look like Grandpa couldn't take care of himself because I was worried." Kieran looked at Adrian and his eyes were wet. "But I wasn't worried, Mom. I was never worried about Grandpa." Adrian's face had gone pale. Victor attempted cross-examination, trying to suggest Kieran had misunderstood or misremembered, but my grandson was unshakable. He repeated the exact words, the exact date, the exact context. A 13-year-old with perfect recall telling the truth, because no one had taught him it was acceptable to lie. Helene Darnell's face had drained of color. She sat rigid in the gallery, and for the first time since this began, she looked like what she was, an elderly woman whose conspiracy had been exposed by a child. Kieran stepped down from the witness stand and walked past his mother without looking at her. I wanted to pull him into a hug, to tell him he'd done the right thing, but he needed to leave the courtroom. Floyd met him at the door. The door would take him somewhere safe until this was over. "Your Honor," I said, "I have one more piece of evidence to present." I pulled up an email on the courtroom display. The metadata was clear, sent October 1st, 2025, from Brent Harrington's personal email to an address I'd traced to a woman named Jessica Monroe. This email was obtained through legal discovery. The recipient, Jessica Monroe, is a woman my son-in-law has been seeing for approximately 8 months. Brent's head snapped up. Adrienne turned to look at him, confusion and dawning horror on her face. I read the email aloud. "Jessica, once the guardianship is finalized and we get control of the house, I'll leave. I can't keep pretending anymore. The old man's assets will make the divorce easier. Give me 2 months after the court order, then we can start our life together. Love always, B." The email printout fluttered from Adrienne's hand to the floor. One corner landed in a sliver of November sunlight from the high window, illuminating Brent's signature, "Love always B," written 5 days before the guardianship petition was filed. Brent lunged toward me. "That's a lie." The bailiff moved fast, intercepting him, forcing him back to his seat. "Sit down, Mr. Harrington," Judge Dalton said, voice sharp as broken glass. "This court will take a 30-minute recess," Judge Dalton said. Adrienne said nothing. She picked up her pen, wrote something on the notepad in front of her, and capped it. Then she straightened in her chair and waited for recess like someone who had done this before. Adrienne's silent acknowledgement hung in the air during the 30-minute recess. Judge Dalton's gavel struck twice, calling us back, and Victor Prescott rose without meeting Adrienne's eyes. "Mr. Prescott," Judge Dalton said, "does the petitioner wish to continue arguing that Mr. Whitfield lacks the capacity to manage his own affairs?" Victor stood silent for a moment, looking at the evidence binders spread across his table. Then he looked at Adrienne, at Brent, at Helene in the gallery. When he spoke, his voice was measured but firm. "Your Honor, I cannot in good conscience continue representing this argument." The courtroom went still. "The evidence presented speaks for itself," Victor continued. "Digital forensics documenting attempted fraud, audio recordings of conspiracy, documentary evidence of shell company infrastructure, a child's testimony about being exploited for courtroom sympathy." He paused. "I'm their attorney, Your Honor. I'm not an accomplice." "Are you withdrawing the petition entirely?" "I'm withdrawing my support for the incompetence claim, while remaining counsel of record for procedural purposes. My clients may choose to continue pro se or seek new representation, but I cannot ethically argue a position that the evidence has thoroughly disproven." Judge Dalton nodded slowly. "The court appreciates your candor, counselor. Request granted." Victor sat down. Adrienne turned to him, started to speak, but he shook his head slightly. Whatever he might have represented her for in good faith had ended when the divorce email appeared. Court adjourned until the following morning. November 7th arrived with clear skies and cold air that made the courthouse steps slippery. I arrived early as I had every day. The courtroom felt different now, less like a battlefield, more like a place where truth had already won, and we were just waiting for the official declaration. Judge Dalton entered at 9 precisely. "Before we proceed to any further testimony or closing statements," he said, "I want to address something directly." He opened my personnel file, the thick folder that had sat on his bench throughout the trial. Mr. Whitfield's career file shows 38 years investigating federal financial fraud, 217 cases involving guardianship fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation schemes. He looked up at me. He spent 4 decades determining whether others were competent to manage money and make sound financial decisions. The courtroom waited. Every fraud case I'd investigated, every manipulator I'd exposed, every pattern I'd documented, all of it in the file Judge Dalton held. "The irony of this petition," he continued, "is that the person allegedly incompetent is more qualified to identify financial fraud than most attorneys in this courthouse. The psychiatric evaluation confirms full cognitive capacity. The evidence presented demonstrates methodical investigation and documentation. The supposed incompetence is in fact expertise being used for self-defense." He closed the file. "The court finds no basis whatsoever for guardianship or supervision. Mr. Whitfield retains full legal capacity and control over all his affairs. The petition is denied." I felt Floyd's hand on my shoulder from the row behind me. Relief, yes. But also something hollow. I'd won the legal battle, but lost pieces of my family I'd never get back. "However," Judge Dalton continued, and the word made everyone freeze, "there are matters beyond this guardianship petition that require attention." I stood. "Your Honor, I have additional evidence to present regarding the financial conspiracy that led to this petition." "Proceed." I presented the financial records I'd been holding in reserve bank statements, showing $47,000 in transfers between Helene's and Brent's accounts from August through October, 3 months before the guardianship petition was filed. Money moving in patterns designed to obscure the source and purpose. "How did you obtain these private banking records, Mr. Whitfield?" Judge Dalton asked. 38 years investigating fraud, Your Honor. I know where to look, I know what patterns indicate conspiracy, and I know how to document evidence legally." Helene's hand found Brent's wrist under the table. The gesture looked protective. It was not her fingernails dug crescents into his skin, and he winced. "These transfers," I continued, "show coordination between Helene Darnell and Brent Harrington months before this petition was filed. Combined with the shell company structure, the attempted electronic fraud, the divorce planning, and the recorded conspiracy discussion, this represents organized elder financial abuse." Judge Dalton examined the records carefully. "These are serious allegations. They're documented facts, Your Honor, and they fall under federal jurisdiction for elder abuse, conspiracy, and guardianship fraud." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone, spoke briefly to his clerk, and set it down. "I'm ordering these financial records, along with all evidence presented in this trial, to be immediately transferred to the Texas Attorney General's office and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." He looked directly at Helene and Brent. "This court cannot and will not ignore evidence of criminal conspiracy presented during legal proceedings." Brent started to stand. Helene pulled him back down. "Furthermore," Judge Dalton said, voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been a federal prosecutor before becoming a judge, "all parties named in these financial records are ordered to remain within this jurisdiction, pending Attorney General review." The bailiff stepped forward, repeating the instruction louder, to ensure Helene and Brent heard clearly. "Do you understand this order?" Judge Dalton asked them directly. "Yes," Helene said, her voice finally small. Brent just nodded. I watched my daughter stand between her husband and her grandmother, realizing she was now a potential witness rather than a defendant. The conspiracy that had used her grief had transformed her from perpetrator to victim, though not innocent perhaps, but definitely used. Judge Dalton set down the financial documents. This court will issue its formal written ruling within 72 hours. Until then, we are adjourned. The gavel fell with finality. The gavel fell with finality, and I walked out of that courthouse victorious. The house is quieter than I remember, 73 years old, vindicated in court, and I have never felt more alone. Floyd found me in my kitchen the next afternoon, staring at coffee I'd forgotten to drink. He let himself in through the back door, the way he'd done for 40 years, and sat down across from me without asking permission. "You proved them wrong," he said. "That counts for something. I kept the house." I gestured around the kitchen where Wilma and I had shared morning coffee for 4 decades. "But Adrienne's never coming back, is she?" Floyd was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe that's not the question you should be asking." "What question should I ask?" "Whether keeping your independence was worth fighting for, regardless of who you had to fight." I thought about that. About Wilma's letter and her documentation. About the conspiracy that had started while she was still alive. About Kieran's courage and Adrienne's manipulation, and the recordings that had exposed everything. "I saved the house," I said finally. "But I lost my daughter in the process." "You lost her the moment she chose to listen to Helene, instead of remembering who you were." Floyd's voice was gentle but firm. "That wasn't your doing, Lester. That was hers." The November days between the judge's ruling and the formal verdict were strange time that felt both too fast and too slow. I walked through the house, touching things Wilma had chosen, sitting in chairs we'd bought together, looking at photos of a family that no longer existed in any recognizable form. Kieran called twice, checking on me. I told him I was fine, which was technically true and emotionally false. I never heard from Adrienne again. Some people don't come back, not because the door is closed, but because they never wanted the door in the first place. They only wanted what was behind it. I stopped at Wilma's photograph on the mantel, the one from our 40th anniversary, where she was laughing at something I'd said, her eyes bright with joy I'd never see again. "I won," I whispered to her smile. "The judge ruled in my favor. The house is mine. The criminal investigation is moving forward. I won." Her photograph looked back at me with that same warm expression, captured forever in a moment when our family was whole. But I don't know what that means anymore. I spent November 10th wondering what victory meant. Judge Dalton's voice filled the courtroom one final time that morning. "In the matter of the guardianship of Lester Whitfield, this court has reached its decision." The courtroom was nearly empty compared to the crowded days of testimony. Adrienne sat at the plaintiff's table with Victor Prescott. Brent was notably absent. I'd heard he'd been advised by his own attorney not to attend. Helene sat in the gallery, spine, straight face, expressionless. I stood at my table alone, the way I'd stood through this entire trial. "The petition for guardianship is denied," Judge Dalton said. "Not simply denied, but denied with prejudice, meaning this matter cannot be refiled by the same petitioners. Mr. Whitfield retains full legal capacity to manage his own affairs, his own finances, and his own life." The gavel fell. Helene's hand gripped the bench in front of her. Adrienne sat perfectly still, not breathing. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the petitioners shall bear all court costs associated with these proceedings. The financial records presented as evidence are hereby officially transferred to the Texas Attorney General's office and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit for investigation of potential elder financial abuse, guardianship fraud, and conspiracy, all of which constitute first-degree felonies under Texas law." He looked directly at Helene, then at the empty seat, where Brent should have been. "This matter is closed." The gavel fell again, final and absolute. I'd won. Completely unequivocally, with language that meant they could never try this again. The house was mine. My accounts were mine. My life was mine, and I felt hollow. Floyd walked me out of the courthouse. The November air was cold, the sky that particular shade of gray that Texas gets before winter truly arrives. "You did it," he said. "I did. The house is yours. They can't touch you." "I know." He heard what I wasn't saying. We'd worked together long enough that he knew when victory felt like loss. The days that followed brought news in pieces, each one arriving, like aftershocks from an earthquake. Floyd kept me informed, his paralegal contact still feeding him information about the opposing side's collapse. November 15th. The FBI contacted Brent. His accounts personal and the Holloway LLC were frozen pending investigation. He'd hired a criminal defense attorney by the end of the day. November 17th. Helene retained her own criminal lawyer, a high-priced specialist from Houston who dealt with white-collar crime. More interesting, Floyd's contact discovered that investigators had reopened Helene's involvement in a 2010 Oklahoma case. Another elderly man, another guardianship attempt, another pattern of financial manipulation. This time, with documented evidence from my case, they had grounds for prosecution. November 18th, Adrienne received notice from the Attorney General's office. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, prosecutors determined she would not face criminal charges. They classified her as a victim, manipulated by her grandmother, betrayed by her husband, her grief weaponized for financial gain. Floyd told me this sitting in my kitchen on November 19th, drinking coffee at the same table where this had all started with Adrienne's questions about life insurance. "She's clear," he said. "Legally, at least. That's good." Brent filed for divorce the same morning she got the notice. I looked up from my coffee. "He waited," Floyd explained, "until he knew she wasn't facing charges. Monitored her legal status, made sure she was clear, then filed papers within hours. His attorney had them ready to go. How do you measure a victory? Court costs paid, house secured, criminal charges filed, and my daughter lost everything in a single morning. I used her all the way to the end," I said quietly. "Helene too. Neither of them have contacted Adrienne since the verdict. She's alone in this. She was alone the whole time. She just didn't know it." Floyd finished his coffee, set the cup down carefully. "Thanksgiving's next week." "I know. You going to invite her?" I didn't answer. Didn't know how to answer. Floyd left me with that question hanging in the air. I spent November 20th walking through my house, really seeing it for the first time since the trial ended. The living room where I'd recorded Helene's conspiracy. The kitchen where Adrienne had cataloged my assets. The bedroom where I'd found Wilma's keepsake box with her letter and notebook. Every room held memories of the battle, but also memories from before, 46 years with Wilma watching. Adrienne grow up, family dinners and holidays and ordinary mornings, drinking coffee before work. I'd saved the house. But what was it now? A victory monument, a fortress I'd defended successfully, but that nobody wanted to visit anymore. I sat down at my kitchen table as evening fell. The calendar on the wall showed November 20th in bold numbers. I counted forward 7 days until Thanksgiving. 7 days to decide if I wanted to spend the holiday alone in the house I'd fought for, or if I wanted to reach out to the daughter who'd tried to take it from me. 7 days to figure out if forgiveness was something you earned or something you gave. 7 days to determine whether keeping my independence was worth the cost of my family. My phone sat on the table in front of me. Adrienne's number was still in my contacts. I could call. Could send a text. Could extend an invitation that might rebuild something, or might just create more pain for both of us. Floyd's question echoed, "You going to invite her?" I looked around my kitchen, clean, organized mine. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. The way it had been since Wilma died, but somehow more so now. 7 days until Thanksgiving. I didn't know if Adrienne would come if I asked. Didn't know if I should ask. Didn't know if forgiveness was something you earned through suffering or gave despite it. The calendar stared back at me, November 20th. Becoming November 21st as midnight approached, each day bringing Thanksgiving closer and my decision no clearer. I sit across from Floyd at his accounting office on November 18th, watching him arrange trust documents into neat stacks. 7 days ago, Judge Dalton declared me competent. 7 days from now, Thanksgiving arrives. Today, I'm building something that will outlast the damage Helene tried to inflict. The Kieran Whitfield Trust. Floyd says, sliding the first set of papers toward me. You're establishing this with me as trustee. If anything happens to you, Kieran receives the Cedar Park house and your financial assets when he turns 25. No guardianship proceedings, no court battles, no Helene Darnell swooping in to claim control. I sign my name carefully. This signature protects the person I love most. There's something else, I tell Floyd. The scholarship fund we discussed. He pulls out a second folder marked the Whitfield Garrison Scholarship for Children of Financial Abuse Survivors. We're seeding it with $50,000 from your savings. It'll provide college funding for kids whose grandparents were victimized by financial exploitation, guardianship, abuse, power of attorney fraud. Any of it. Floyd sets down his pen and meets my eyes. Lester, you're turning what Helene tried to do to you into protection for other families. That's not just practical. That's redemption. I don't feel redeemed. I feel like a man who spent 6 months fighting for his right to exist independently, who watched his daughter testify against him in open court. But maybe redemption isn't about feeling whole again. Maybe it's about making sure the breaking serves some purpose beyond the pain. We finish the paperwork by noon. Floyd walks me to my car. Thanksgiving next week, he says. You going to invite Adrienne? I don't know. I admit. Kieran's coming. I don't know if she'd even want to be in the same room as me after everything that happened in court. Floyd nods. Well, whatever you decide, you know Martha and I are cooking enough for an army. You're welcome at our table. I drive home through afternoon traffic, the trust documents safe in a folder on my passenger seat. The house looks the same as it did 6 months ago when Deputy Marshal Chen served me with guardianship papers. But something fundamental has changed. It's mine with legal certainty that no one can challenge or manipulate or steal. I never heard from Adrienne again. Some people don't come back, not because the door is closed, but because they never wanted the door in the first place. They only wanted what was behind it. 3 days later, on November 25, I walk through my house, slowly touching things, the kitchen counter where I've made coffee every morning for 40 years. The living room bookshelves. I built myself in 1987. The back bedroom where Adrienne slept when she was small. It's mine. All of it. The court said so. The trust documents say so. But more than that, I feel it a settling in my bones that says I belong here, that no one can force me out. I sit on the back porch as afternoon fades into evening. November air carries the scent of someone's fireplace down the street. I breathe deeply for what feels like the first time in 6 months. My phone vibrates in my pocket. Kieran's name glows on the screen. Hey, Grandpa, can I come a day early? Want to spend more time with you. I'll be there Wednesday night if that's okay. I read it twice, making sure I understand. My grandson wants extra time, not obligatory holiday time. He wants to see me. I type back, yes, come whenever you're ready. I'll have your room set up. His response arrives almost immediately. Love you, Grandpa. See you soon. I sit there holding my phone, watching Thanksgiving Eve approach, and feel something I haven't felt since June: hope. That doesn't require defending joy, that doesn't need a lawyer's validation, family connection, that no one can take away. Kieran sets 3 places at the dining table on Thanksgiving morning, not the 6 from last year, and I realize smaller can mean warmer. He arrived Wednesday night, carrying grocery bags and a duffel, hugged me without hesitation, and asked what time we should start the turkey. No mention of his parents. No awkward explanation of why he chose this table over theirs. He simply came home. Now he moves through my kitchen with the easy confidence of someone who belongs here, pulling out the roasting pan Wilma used every November, checking the temperature gauge I've had since 1992. 13 years old, and he already remembers exactly where I keep the good carving knife. Floyd's coming at 2 right. Kieran asks, seasoning the turkey with the herb blend Wilma taught him to make when he was 12. 2 o'clock. I confirm. He's bringing sweet potato casserole and stories about the guardianship hearing that'll make you laugh and cringe simultaneously. Kieran grins. Did you really cross-examine great-grandmother Helene for 40 minutes straight? 43. I correct. And she gave me everything I needed. Admitted. The financial motivation contradicted her own testimony, revealed exactly who orchestrated the whole scheme. He slides the turkey into the oven, sets the timer. Grandpa, did you ever think you'd lose the house? The question hangs in the kitchen between the smell of sage and the sound of the oven fan. I could lie, tell him I never doubted. But Kieran chose to spend Thanksgiving here despite everything his parents put me through, despite the family fracture and betrayal. He deserves honesty. Every day, I tell him. But I knew if I lost it without fighting, I'd lose more than the house. I'd lose the certainty that truth still matters, that documentation defeats manipulation, that competence can defend itself if given the chance. He nods, slowly absorbing this. Then he met my eyes. I'm exactly where I want to be, Grandpa. I saw what they tried to do. I read the court filings. I know what great-grandmother Helene wanted, and how Dad calculated the real estate value before you were even declared incompetent. I'm not a kid. I can see clearly who you are. Floyd arrives at 2, carrying a casserole dish and a bottle of wine that costs more than my weekly grocery budget. He hugs Kieran, claps my shoulder, surveys the table set for 3. To the smallest Thanksgiving this house has seen, he says when we sit down with full plates, raising his glass. And maybe the most honest one. We eat slowly, talking about everything except the guardianship, until Kieran asks Floyd to tell the story of my cross-examination. Floyd obliges with dramatic flair, reenacting Helene's facial expressions. When I presented the Cedar Park property tax records she'd researched 3 months before filing. Kieran laughs so hard he nearly chokes on cranberry sauce. 3 plates on a table built for 8. I watch Kieran reach for the potatoes and realize abundance was never about numbers. Last Thanksgiving, we had 6 people and careful conversation, everyone performing family, while avoiding anything real. Today we have 3, and the kind of warmth that only comes from choosing to be together after you've seen the worst. Floyd leaves at sunset, taking leftovers, and promising to review the scholarship fund disbursement criteria next week. Kieran and I carry dishes to the kitchen, establish an easy rhythm. I wash, he dries, neither of us rushing. Are you sad about Mom? He asks quietly, setting a plate in the rack. I consider the question carefully. Sad, yes. Hopeless, no. Those are different things. Your mother made a terrible choice under your great-grandmother's influence. Whether she finds her way back from that, I don't know. But I left the door open. That's all I can do. He dries 3 more plates before speaking again. Does Grandma Wilma know you won? The question catches me sideways. I set down the dish I'm washing, turn to look at my grandson's face, so earnest, so much like Wilma's when she asked the questions that mattered. She knew before I knew, I tell him. Every document I needed in that courtroom, 40 years of financial records, tax returns, property deeds, investment statements. Your grandmother organized all of it. Not after she got sick. Years before. She created a filing system labeled "Everything," kept it current. When I needed to prove I'd managed my finances competently for 4 decades, everything was already there. Alphabetized, cross-referenced, ready. Kieran stares at me. She knew someone might try this. She knew that truth needs documentation. I say, that protection means preparation. that the people who love you defend you even after they're gone if they prepare the ground beforehand. Your grandmother was the true guardian all along, not controlling, not manipulating, just making sure I'd have what I needed when the fight came. We finish the dishes in silence that feels like understanding. Later we sit on the back porch under November stars. Kieran curls up on the porch swing, and I drape Wilma's quilt over him, the one she made in 2006 with fabric scraps from Adrienne's childhood dresses. He falls asleep there, breathing steady and peaceful, choosing to spend his Thanksgiving break in this house with this grandfather, who stood in Travis County Courthouse and cross-examined his own mother-in-law for 43 minutes to keep his independence. I look up at the Texas stars, 73 years old. House intact. Daughter wounded but not lost. Grandson beside me asking real questions. The stars over Cedar Park look exactly as they did when Wilma was here. I understand now what she understood then: you don't protect what you love by controlling it. You protect it by preparing, by documenting truth, by making sure that when the fight comes, those you love have what they need to stand. Wilma gave me that. I gave Kieran the trust and the scholarship fund. Adrienne might find her way back or might not, but the door remains open. The house is mine. The grandson chose to come. The stars are bright. Some victories are measured in houses kept truths told, and grandsons who still come home. And to you, listening to my story, remember this: documentation defeats manipulation, but family wounds run deeper than any courtroom victory. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the warning signs earlier when Helene asked pointed questions about my finances, when Brent mentioned the house's value too often, when Adrienne grew distant after Wilma died. I was so focused on grief that I missed the storm gathering. Don't make my mistake: pay attention when people become more interested in what you own than who you are. The lesson through this family drama, revenge, isn't just about keeping records. It's understanding that protecting yourself is wisdom, not paranoia. Wilma organized everything because she knew people who truly love you prepare you for unseen battles. I believe God placed her as my guardian, teaching me protection means preparation. These family stories, revenge, remind us love sometimes means building walls before you need them. All family drama, revenge stories prove documentation creates shields. When facing family stories, revenge situations, remember family drama. Revenge teaches preparation, saves everything. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Have you ever had to defend yourself against family? What would you have done in my position? Please share this with someone who needs to hear they're not alone in these battles. If you haven't already, subscribe to Dad Family Revenge for more stories about standing your ground when family crosses the line. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters, and I'm honored you spent it here with me. One final note: while based on real experiences, certain details have been fictionalized to protect privacy and emphasize lessons learned. What's real is the message: protect yourself. Document everything, and never let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself is wrong.